Community Redevelopment Agency.
Oh, good.
I want to convene this meeting, and we will start with public comments on agenda items. Do we have any?
Thank you, Mayor Gillum. At this time, I do have 2 speaker cards as it relates to public agenda items. The first speaker I have is Dr. Hollyfield, followed by Ms. Brenda Williams. If you would, please come to the podium, give your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Dr. Hollifield, Longleaf Court. In 1860, 75% of Leon County was enslaved, according to the U.S. Census. We speak of generational poverty of blacks. We don't speak of huge generational wealth of whites created on the backs of black people. Generational fortunes passed forward after the South's defeat through powerful institutions, Capital City Bank Group, Horsley Law Firm, St. John's Episcopal Church, Florida State University. And now we have the CRA as a mechanism to advance white generational wealth. Economic segregation and income inequality have been increased by the CRA. Millions given to rich people that don't even need it. Washington Square, Doubletree, Ron Sachs, Seminole Boosters. The CRA is a corrupt institution. It doesn't need to be expanded. It needs to be killed. Purpose of the CRA now is the white gentrification of the South Side. Roxanne wants a white-owned coffee shop on every corner on the South Side. Money goes to Big Ben Cares, a non-profit. The community gets nothing from this, except police turn on black people. There's no tax increment. There's no TIF, tax increment financing for nonprofits. This should have never happened. There's no property tax. So in summary, it's time to end the CRA, a corrupt institution that we simply need to get rid of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Brenda.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
My name is Brenda Williams, and I am the Executive Director of the Tallahassee Housing Authority. As you are aware, the Tallahassee Housing Authority recently, well, actually, I'm here in support, before I move any further, I'm here in support of item number 7, expansion of the CRA. As you are aware, the Housing Authority recently completed its master plan for the Orange Avenue Apartments and corridor, and Orange Avenue corridor between Blairstone and Monroe Street. The plan calls for the new construction of a mixed-income community of 390 units on-site and approximately 175 units off-site. The estimated construction costs all in is about $90 million. The next step in the process is for the Housing Authority to begin to, put together the financing. A major primary source of funding will be low-income housing tax credits. We anticipate that we will submit an application to the Florida Housing Finance Corporation in October and again in November. We are currently negotiating an agreement with a developer's agreement with Columbia Residential as our developer partner. That agreement will go to our board for approval on June the 19th. How does this approval, what are the advantages for the Housing Authority's project? Not a whole lot on the front end, but certainly on the back end. The expansion will increase economic development, not only close to the site, but in the entire South Side community. A $90 million investment is certainly an incentive for economic development. So I hope that you will vote yes.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Those are all the speaker cards that I have for agenda speakers.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We're now on to item 3.01, project updates. Ms. Manning.
I need some help with this thing. I'm not sure how to turn on the... Oh, it's on? Good. Okay, cool. We have 2 project updates for you this morning. Both of them, great news. The first one, I want to give you just a brief update. I think I got it. Thank you. On Cascades Park and the project that's going on there. As you know, they're moving forward with demolition and land clearing in preparation for construction. In an abundance of caution, the CRA did order a second environmental assessment. That has been completed. It came back from FDEP with a recommendation of no further action, which is essentially, yes, it really is clean property. You're good to go. We were very happy about that. We're having an archaeological assessment completed in June, and whatever comes out of that, we'll certainly keep you up to date on that. The project is moving forward through the PUD process. And we're working with staff on that. So we're very excited about it. We're looking forward to a great project. I know the developer, Sean McIntyre, is here, and he has some information that he wants to provide for you. And I'm going to ask him to come up. There he is.
Good morning. I'm Sean McIntyre, Managing Partner for North American Properties, Florida. Briefly, as Roxanne said, we are proceeding through the process. Last time the archaeological issue was brought to this board, and we have met with them and are addressing those issues at the board's request. One of the things that has been in our RFPs for over 3 years has been a boutique hotel, and I can announce today that there will be a new 154-room Marriott AC, which is their highest brand. There's only 4 in the state of Florida at this time. Marriott is signed and committed, and there's the press will be receiving a press release from quotes from Marriott and the other developers. So that is a part of the promise that we made to deliver a boutique hotel to downtown Tallahassee, brand new Marriott, be able to be used with the app and the phone. And I'll take my time here to thank the county for being here for as many years. I came here in 2011. CRA invested $2.5 million in my projects in Gaines Street. I invested $200 million. That was quite a return, and will now last through another 8 years funding the South Side, because all of my student housing projects are in the South Side CRA. So the economic model does work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
That is great news. And just to comment on that, that hotel and the space in that project will go a long way toward helping the city attract larger conventions. So we're very excited to see that on a larger scale. The second update is Frenchtown Partners. As you'll recall, this is the old shelter site and a lot of the area around it. The property is owned by the CRA, by private developer, or by private interests, and also by Frenchtown Partnership. We gave them a deadline to meet to issue an RFP and come back with a proposal. They have done that. We've had one meeting with them to just sort of get introduced to the concept. We did receive some information this morning at about 6:30, but we have not had time to review it adequately. But they are here today. I know they'd like to talk to you about what their concept is, and there'll be a very brief, maybe 2 or 3 slide presentation. We're excited about this. We're very glad to see this moving forward, but a couple of things I need to say. We are not, at this point, remotely ready to make a recommendation on funding because we have not had a chance to do the appropriate analysis. And on a project this large, and in fact with all of our CRA projects, process is everything. So we need to be able to sit down with the developer, work through it, learn what the CRA role might be, what we can actually afford to do. Also, we would also recommend that we advertise, as we usually do, our large projects, and list the agenda in the newspaper before we make any motions or take any actions on that. But we're very excited about it. We think they've put together a very interesting proposal and a pretty good team. So I'd like to introduce Tony Brown. There he is.
Just advance it here. Good morning. I'm Tony Brown. I'm the principal in T. Brown Consulting Group. We are a consulting and real estate development firm. I'm going to be brief. As Roxanne said, she asked me to just come and provide an update and to see if you all had questions. Our firm did respond to the RFP, and the RFP identified a very dense proposed development that actually in the proposal included each of the property owners except one of the major ones, and that was the Community Redevelopment Agency. As the organization represented, it had the site control, if you will, to present and offer a plan. The plan that they asked us to respond to in the RFP was a program that would allow for about 58,000 square feet of retail space in 3 buildings, between 200 to 250 condo units, depending on size, 20,000 square feet of office tower, or perhaps a medical clinic at the corner, 20 townhomes, and the biggest issue was that the plan required 700 parking spaces. The team that we put together and responded with included both local, national, and statewide players. The local partners, Pittman Law Group, Fitzgerald Collaborative, that designed the urban plan, Moore-Bass Consulting, that will provide this engineering services and the surveys, a national construction company, and a national parking consultant, as well as a national tax credit consultant that will help us raise the necessary equity to make this program come about. I think the team wanted me to introduce myself. I come with a very extensive background in community development. Perhaps my national reputation is in the area of community development finance. I've designed the healthy food financing strategy for the Kroger Company, helping them put $500 million of assets of grocery stores into low-income communities. What attracted me about the Frenchtown project, that it too desired to have a grocery store location, so it would be my first priority. My reputation also in Ohio is jump-starting the Uptown Consortium. You just heard from North American Properties, his major partner, Dan Schimberg, and I worked very closely together to make sure that the Vine Street corridor was indeed a catalyst, and so well known to the North American Partners players and to some of the other developers that are developing in this CRA. The thing that I helped the community understand, that the magnitude of their development, given the pattern of ownership, really required a process in working with the CRA to swap property, to agree on a plan with the other property owners in order to ensure that this development occurs. It required the construction of about $27 million in parking. I am strictly an urban developer. I am excited about turning around neighborhoods and business districts, and I know that one of the biggest impediment to urban development, and particularly to urban redevelopment, is the cost of parking in order to spark redevelopment. It would require new streets, new access easements, and even more importantly, it'll require at least $49 million worth of private development. So for every dollar of private development, about 60-something cents in perhaps public. Is that a good ratio? We don't know. And that's why we have talked to staff about putting together a land development agreement so that we can see what is the magnitude of private development that could help provide the return to the public investment. And given the time that I was allotted, I'll just stop there in case the board had any questions.
Great. Other questions? Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been waiting for about 2 years for the summation of 5 minutes, and I was wondering, after 2 years of waiting for this particular project to come in, if we could give just a little more time. I wanted to hear the rest of the vision, maybe, and to see how they would schedule to bring the project forward. In particular, the $27 million parking lot, is that a game changer that we needn't pursue and go any further, because that's just more than the public wants to assume?
Thank you, Commissioner. I think if there are no objections, please.
Continue. So the first process, if you will, in presenting to the property owners, and to Ms. Manning's point, the CRA was not present when I interviewed before the other property owners. This was a presentation to the private property owners. I said, if the commitment is to put this major development onto the site that's identified as the Frenchtown Gateway, that the public improvements, if the parking garage is intended to be a public parking garage, the right-of-way easements, if all of those intended to be public, then the public improvements would encroach on everyone's property. And so the first recommendation was to have a serious discussion with the CRA in a process to be more or less, if you will, the team captain in a process that would allow for the property to be swapped in places where it made sense for the other major property owners, being Bethel, West Tennessee Street Partners, and the Roberts family. They are the largest. Those are the big four: the CRA, Bethel, the Roberts family, and West Tennessee Street Partners. The other property owners, Mitchell's Estate, Mr. Davis, and the Landers, are smaller property owners that they could either figure out how to partner with the other property owners, sell their interests, or look to develop it in another fashion. So in meeting with the individual property owners outside the group, what I heard is that individual members would like to see tweaks to the plan. I think everyone is very much committed to seeing their properties collectively be a catalyst for new goods and services to the community, to be a wonderful gateway into Frenchtown. And so there would be a need to do some tweaking to the plan. And as part of this land development plan, and sort of I identified it in like 3 different steps, much of which got clarified in our meetings yesterday with many of you, with the exception of Commissioner Miller, whom we didn't get a chance to meet with. The first part would be to let's work with the community, with the other property owners. Let's massage the plan to understand what would make this project catalytic. The second step would be what are the ways to finance the parking? In this response to the proposal, I included a financing commitment of $25 million from a parking firm that offered to build the parking, provided that the city would lease the parking garage, and that at the end of a 30-year term, the city would own the garage. Then that's a huge commitment and a big request, and so that would need to first be studied and analyzed. And so part of the request would be to do the parking study, and then to look at the other professional services, engineering, and other things in order to come back with what we outlined as what the outcomes would be. It would be a final conceptual plan. So the one you're seeing today was is concept 1. The next concept that hopefully we'll have an opportunity to present will be one where all the property owners can stand before you and say, yes, this is what we want to do, and that your staff can also say that, yes, this is what they've asked, potentially, and what it could cost, and they would have a recommendation. If there's a green light to move forward, then what we have outlined in part 2 of this is that then we move to a site plan approval. What that would then mean is that we could be specific about which properties are swapped with the CRA or not. We could be specific about which properties should be purchased or not. And then we could look at And I think there's a recommendation to have a Macomb Street improvement and a facade improvement program for the buildings that would stay. And at that point, we would have consulted with staff to identify different scenarios to construct parking, whether it's just for the development or whether there is surplus parking space for all the wonderful new development that's occurring around the area. And so with that, and with the financing plan for the garage, hopefully everyone will be in sync. And then what will happen next is the private development. And this is what I've proposed to the team to be a fee developer at risk. So to help all the property owners work through the elements of the development plan in order to make sure that the result of this is a brand new development. And then my firm we have financing commitments to do phase 1, which is the site to the east that would be the grocery store, about 80 to 90 units of apartments, and about 10 of the townhomes. And so that, without the parking estimate, we represent to be about a $12 to $14 million investment. And then we will work with the other property owners in whatever way they would like my firm to assist them, from anywhere from financing to joint venturing or to interact with the CRA staff in some other component. So that would be our proposal.
Commissioner Maddox, followed by Commissioner Proctor. Commissioner Proctor, if you don't mind yielding, and then we'll go to
Ms. Robinson, from what you outlined, this is interesting, and it speaks to the overlap of the CRA and the city. But actually, it's the city commission that would greenlight or agree to or not to embrace the parking thingy. So the future of this project is not with the CRA as much as it's with the city commission. Is that what I heard you say?
I think eventually for the major investment, when it comes down to the issue of how dense of a development and whether it could support a parking structure. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, very good. I yield.
Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you. Roxanne, just a couple questions.
Let me stay.
Are we in I guess, the right fashion to entertain a motion, given the fact that this is just a presentation? Or it's just no action should be taken today?
We don't need any action today. We're ready and already working with them on the project. We just need to follow our process, do the analysis, work out all the different options, and then come back with a recommendation.
So, from what I understand, you're asking for a land development agreement, yes? With the CRA, with the city?
That's correct.
Okay. So you wouldn't need any direction from us to start working with the city to construct such things for us to consider?
No, that's part of every project we do. We coordinate with the city.
Okay, and what about I believe it was $292,000?
That's correct.
What about that ask?
That we would need to take a look at that now. As you'll probably recall, about a year ago, we had a development analysis done on that property by an independent firm. That is available. I know Frenchtown Partners were aware of it. There's a lot of information out there. We usually, to my knowledge, have not invested in the upfront preparation work on a project. And what I would recommend is let us sit down, figure out what's what, and if that is part of what needs to happen, we can bring that back as part of the package in July.
Well, I don't know. I think the formality of taking action gives an indication of what this board is willing to do. I'm not really, given the fact this is the county's last meeting here, I wouldn't dare make a motion. I would look to the city commissioners and the mayor to give some leadership on where they think this thing should go. But I think at least give us some indication that this board will entertain the thought of what the vision is right now. I don't know if you need that verbally or formal action, but me for one, I think, as Commissioner Proctor said, it's been 2 years since they've been working on this. I think they're on some good solid ground. The one concern I did have, and I relayed this to them when I met with them, was the amount of land that would be owned by the CRA. But if the parking piece works out, I think both entities could be made whole, and there's ways we could work this out. I don't really want to, again, I wouldn't dare make a motion, but then again, I also want to give them some kind of clarity as to where this board will stand in the future on seeing some type of proposal like we see here today come back. Because I don't know if the rest of the board was expecting something different. But when I sat down with them, I was expecting something different. A lot less ownership by the CRA, more ownership by the developer. But when they actually showed what they showed, I was inclined to be receptive to it. But what I don't want to do is have them leave here today, go down this road, and then come back and this board not be willing to entertain what we're looking at today, even if it changes slightly. So again, if you're suggesting no form of action needs to be taken, I mean, I understand, but I do think this board needs to give them some kind of indication on how they feel about what they're looking at today.
I think your comments go in the record, and that's one reason they're here, basically, is to hear what you have to say and what you're thinking. And I can also tell you CRA staff is really pleased to see them at this point and with a good partner, and they have a plan A and a plan B. We just need to work through that with them and figure out what our role should be, what the city's role should be. I think everyone's excited about seeing a good development on that property, so I don't know that there's any formal action you could take other than to just indicate that you're in favor of it or what your questions are, what your comments are.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, thank you, Commissioner. And I'll just say I'd be fine to entertain the request for the support that was requested today, the $292,000. I do think at no point did I suffer illusions that this project would be one only undertaken by the private sector. Similar to projects of this scale that we've done in other parts of our community, there has been significant participation from this board, from the CRA, in order to bring those to fruition. I also appreciate, as a part of this project, that Bethel CDC, the Bethel Church, Reverend Holmes, these are folks who have long, continuous stakes in this part of our community, and I think have strong community trust. So, Commissioner, your opinion actually does still matter today.
I'll make that motion on your behalf.
Tomorrow, maybe not.
My parting shot is I will make that motion on your behalf, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Commissioner Dozier, followed by Commissioner Ziffer, and Commissioner Miller following.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tony, thank you. I really enjoyed our meeting yesterday. Donald, Keith, thank you very much. Excited about how far you all have come, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that we did have a conversation at the end about filling the need in food deserts, and just wanted to acknowledge your hard work on that with Kroger and others, and really excited that not only it might have an impact on this project, but that we would have access to conversations about those issues in our community in general. So thank you for that. As for the motion and where we stand today, I could not support approving the pre-development cost in that motion. And I think that this has been an unusual, at this moment, this has been an unusual process for us, although I'm not sure we have a usual process. I will acknowledge that. But I think that this particular site, this location, demanded more work with the community, with Bethel, with others. Mr. Mayor, as you just said, long-standing commitment to that area. And so I am really excited about the work that has happened in the last 2 years. Keith and Donald and I are talking about this, that it has been 2 years in this conversation. One of the comments I made 2 years ago was making sure that we didn't dilute the Frenchtown Southside CRA so much in this project that we couldn't do smaller projects within Frenchtown particularly, and the entire district. And I'm really encouraged by the project as it stands now, and the reduced cost and the other commitments that, and the work you all have done with the neighborhood to engage everyone, that you've addressed, not just addressed those concerns, but you own it. This is a whole community, whole neighborhood approach. But with that, because this has been a little different process, I think we really owe it to everyone to have our staff, including the Frenchtown Partnership, to have our staff work through the details before making any financial commitment. what I would entertain, and I'd like to make a substitute motion, is to set a deadline, and with some direction from Roxanne, Tony, if we could say we want to see this come back, the royal we, the CRA, since some of us won't be here, see it come back in July or at some meeting in the near future. Roxanne, July would work?
July should probably work. Yeah.
I think that indicates a strong commitment and a desire by the CRA board to see this move more quickly and to get some action on it, but allows the due diligent time on both sides to really make sure for the partnership. I could imagine, this is your estimate right now, but things could change in this dialogue with the owners and with others. So I think that is the best approach for both sides. So again, my motion would be to request that dialogue in the next month and to come back with an agenda item in July so that at that time we can move forward quickly.
There's a substitute motion and a second. I believe it was Commissioner Ziffer, followed by Commissioner Miller.
Clearly, it's an impressive proposal with just about everything that we've talked about. But I will say, after my meeting yesterday, I have more questions than I had prior to the meeting. There's additional investment that would be required from the CRA for land. Clearly, a substantial request from the city of Tallahassee. We're in transition on this board. And so, for me, Commissioner Dozier's recommendation and motion, seconded by Commissioner Miller, makes sense to me. So I'll be supportive of that motion.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Miller.
Well, first of all, Mr. Brown, I want to thank you very much for answering the RFP.
Thank you.
As Commissioner Proctor mentioned, this has been a long discussion, and the evolution on the property over the last 4 or 5 years has been absolutely phenomenal. But there is a lot more going on in the entire area in regards to Frenchtown and 50, what the residents in the community of Frenchtown and Greater Frenchtown want to see there. And Commissioner Dozier's motion fits much more within the timeline of that group coming to some conclusions about design and that sort of thing. So that's why I'm going to be supportive of her motion. I see absolutely no reason but why by August of this year, July, potentially, we can have answers for you. But in all honesty, well, first of all, it's easier to get an appointment with me if you actually call my office, so please feel free to do that. And I am really not comfortable voting on an allocation of money when there's no agenda item, there's no financial information, there's no analysis, no honest-to-goodness concrete language anywhere as to what we actually are agreeing to. So, to be honest, I really don't know. And if I were to vote for the original motion, I would be voting for something that I had no idea what was actually being agreed to. So, for that reason, I'll be anxious to see work in the future. I hope this motion, the Commissioner motion. Hey there. Commissioner Dozier's approach is acceptable to the board, and also, again, encourage you to continue conversations, and hopefully we see some action on the property soon.
Great. Were there any other questions on the pipeline? Seeing none, there is a substitute motion on the floor. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Motion passes, I believe, 5 to 4. 3. I'm sorry, 5 to 3. That also kills the original motion that was under consideration. So thank you all very much. We'll look forward to seeing this item back in July.
So let me understand, what's going to happen in July?
The staff will work intermittently, but between now and the next meeting in July with the developer to bring forth their thinking on how it is that the CRA may be involved at this juncture.
Yeah.
Commissioner Miller.
I would like to again mention that I would appreciate your integrating your conversations with Devin Levins, who is working on the Frenchtown and 50 concepts, and making sure that this is going to be something that is acceptable to the neighborhood at large and is what they want to see there. We're all sure about the grocery store, but I know that in conversations with the group that they are very concerned about appearance and what it looks like, and that it does carry on the history of the area. So please, when you're working together, keep that in mind.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the people who have brought this project. We all do. No entity has put more money in this area over the life of decades than the Bethel Church. And I worked on Tennessee Street cleaning off tables for the Holiday Inn for Mr. Yarborough, was the manager, Mr. Yarborough. And washing dishes on Tennessee Street. And I think of the absence of ownership of businesses on Tennessee Street that African Americans have actually owned. I reported to work there, 10th grade, and I guess people still going there. I really, and I'm using race as a factor, as a dynamic, as an interest, as a point of equity. And I really believe and hope that this magical street, Tennessee, as a matter of historic equity, would be a place that development could occur, led by a team such as the Bethel team. Over the years, the property mass between Tennessee Street and Brevard, there have probably been more arrests of African Americans than in any place in North Florida, from Jacksonville to Pensacola, any place in North Florida. And when you think of the continuous and long-standing arrest center or activities that lead to the arrest or whatever, that 65% of all arrests occur from two neighborhoods in Tallahassee, South City and Frenchtown. But over time, between Tennessee and Brevard Street, there's nowhere in North Florida that more black people get arrested from. I'm hoping that somehow a new take can occur. We have seen the gentrification of businesses historic, and this area is largely compressed where business opportunities are because that's what the law required, segregation. And it's amazing that in an area where once the law required the Robertses to open up economy drugs, it is damn near hard for an area that once upon a time was the only area that an African-American business could start, that today we're raising the bar for ownership, for development in that area, which once upon a time was the only available spot. And so all forms of grocery stores, living, housing, all shapes and fashions occurred there. The gentrification of ownership and that Renaissance Center, which the city and county, I think we each kicked in $15 million. The parking issue, which we had with the Renaissance Center, the structural imperfections, which required additional money with the Renaissance Center. We put a lot out for that parking piece. I don't know how hard we're going to work for parking with this project. That project, which is now underway in front of the Renaissance, one lady said that she had prepaid her funeral, and she didn't know what was going to happen now that Strong and Jones was gone from down there. And for a 90-some-year-old lady to comment about the change of that block, that it affected her because she had prepaid a funeral, was just an amazing thought of what people's minds, they see disintegration and discontinuity of something that once upon a time was certain to them. It's not certain now. I'm leaving, Mr. Mayor, our meeting this morning, but my hopes are that the efforts by this development group will be, I hope we can work through parking and other barriers. I'm very, very glad that in the 22 years I've come to this room to meet with the city, that after 22 years, it somewhat was something special to see the only black development group that I've ever seen in Tallahassee to come forward. I look at familiar faces, friends here on the front row behind Roxanne, and men who've had opportunities in this community who've done excellent, who've done well. I've seen their faces repeatedly. Nothing but respect. But in my 22 years, these are the only black players I've ever seen to show up to ask for an opportunity of support. And that to me is significant. And I hope that 22 years from now, that would occur more frequently. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioners, we're now on to, yes, Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm disappointed that this has been made a racial issue. I respect Commissioner Proctor's comments, but I'm disappointed that it's been made a racial issue. I don't see it as that at all. I see it as a community development issue and an opportunity to revitalize an area that has been allowed to languish for years. I am impressed by the fact that we have a group of African Americans who are interested in the property and want to move forward with its development. That says a lot. But I don't see it as a racial issue at all, and I hope that none of the rest of us see it that way. And as we move forward, we look at doing what's in the best interest of the citizens and residents of the Frenchtown area in particular, but the greater Tallahassee and Leon County community in general. And that's the way I approach this. I committed in the meeting that I had with the group yesterday that I would ensure that the momentum that we have begun continues. There's a likelihood that only two of us will be here in November as a part of this board. I will be one of them. And I can assure you that my commitment to seeing this project move forward will not waver during that time. But we have to do our due diligence, and as I told them yesterday, we've got to make sure that we do this right. And I don't want to see it rushed. One additional month to give staff the opportunity to continue the dialogue and the due diligence. I don't see a problem with that at all, as long as we're continuing to move forward with our efforts to bring this project to fruition. And so that's why I that's why I supported the substitute motion. But yet my commitment to this project is not lessened in any way by giving them that opportunity. And I have to tell you, Commissioner Miller, I was swayed by your testimony because I know that you have been intimately involved in this. And I mentioned that in our meeting with them yesterday, that you have headed up one of the planning groups in that Frenchtown area. So thank you for that. And your comments weighed heavily on my decision to support the substitute motion.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Commissioner Ziffer.
Just a quick comment. Actually, this effort requires greater attention than what we have for other areas, because for those many years we let this area deteriorate as a result of the shelter being there. And as a result of that, that's one of the reasons why there is a lack of business investment. And so we need to actually go above and beyond to try to make this work. And having been a part of that process, it seems like a long time ago, it was just a few years, to buy that shelter property. This was the intent, to have a project like this come forward so that we could see a revitalization there. Having said that, though, because the term gentrification was used earlier, we need to be careful that what we create doesn't create that very gentrification. So I'm going to be talking with our staff, and y'all are going to meet. We're going to meet again. Tony, I will tell you that I talked to former Mayor Pardo, and she speaks so highly of you. And that meant a lot to me because I have great confidence in her. So I appreciate you coming and talking a little bit about what you did there. So for me, I'm going to be trying to make this happen as best I can. But having said that, I'll move consent.
Second.
Great. Were you done with your project updates?
Yes, we are.
Great. There is a motion and a second on consent, which all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. We're now to item 5.01. Roxanne.
I'm going to give sort of a brief introduction that applies to 5.01 and 5.02. And then the staff that have worked closely with the developers on this will give you the formal presentation. But we are very glad to see these two projects come forward for several reasons. They both are student housing projects. Now, I know we've had a lot of conversation about student housing, but these projects are different. They are both by small local developers, one of whom grew up in the area. They are both sort of community benefit projects, so it's not a lot of money, but the projects themselves will improve a block and a half block. The first one, the Greenleaf Twin project that we're recommending approval of $75,000 on, will take an old building, an old apartment building with 8 units total, and it's basically almost a tear down, but they're building it back up, building it together, and they're going to make a very nice project very close to FAMU that can be utilized by students or just by regular people who want to live in the neighborhood. The second one, Retro Development, Rhett Turnquist. Rhett grew up in this area. He grew up in this neighborhood, and for him, this is a project of love, if you will. He went away. He was an assistant fire chief in West Palm Beach, but he's retired and he's back now, and he wants to contribute to the community he grew up in. He's proposing new development on a half block that is about a block away from FAMU, and it will be student housing, but it's new townhouses, and we're recommending $250,000 on that one. Now, we had a conversation previously at this board about 2 years ago about student housing, and the board had indicated they didn't want to see any more student housing projects, and we understand that. But we talked to you in March and asked if these would be appropriate, and I think everyone believes that they are because they're not the big, traditional massive project. These are community development projects at heart, and they'll make a real difference in this community. Now, we're working closely with the city, and the city is looking at several different improvements that they might be able to do in this area. And what we're hoping is with these two new projects, both by local small developers, that we would be able to see some kind of, new growth and regeneration in this neighborhood. So we're heartily recommending approval on both of these. Both applicants are here. Dr. Rowland is here. He's a local cardiac surgeon. And Mr. Turnquist is here. If you have any questions of them, I'm sure they'd be happy to talk about it. But I will hand this over now to our staff who can give you a very brief presentation.
I'm going to move option 1.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on option 1. Would the developers who are here just stand up? I'm not sure who you all are. Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any questions on the item? Commissioner Maddox.
Is this for interior, exterior, interior?
Some of this will be for interior. These are not facade programs. These are, the larger project, not the big, huge ones, but for those projects, we do interior restoration, renovation, and construction.
I'm going to vote against the motion based on my longstanding belief that CRA funds should be used for infrastructure and not for interior of privately owned projects.
Apologies, Commissioner, for skipping over you. Commissioner Dozier, followed by Commissioner Richardson.
No problem at all, Mr. Mayor. I remember well that discussion about student housing on Gaines Street, and I think it was a good approach at that time. We had maxed out, and there's an incentive for companies, Sean, you mentioned this earlier, to invest in that area. We have had our catalyst impact on that area. I love these two projects. They are redevelopment. They are smaller scale. It's in an area I drove through and saw the FAMU Way extension, the progress there just yesterday, it's looking really good, and both of the projects, Dr. Rowland, Ms. Turnquist, were on my mind as I drove through there. So I think this does provide more housing for FAMU. I know that's something the President Robinson has been really interested in, and I think this is unique, having the two of you get into the development area in this way, and having strong ties to the community. So I'm really excited about this, and I think it puts us in the right posture. So I'm glad Commissioner Ziffer already made the motion, and I'll be happy to support both.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support the projects, of course. I've met with both of the developers and talked to them about primarily their interest in the community, not just coming in and putting up a development to make a profit, but their true interest in the community and improving the Bond community. And I think that these projects will serve as an impetus for further development. And so that's the reason I will support it this morning. But I do have the concern that Commissioner Maddox raised, Scott Maddox, in terms of the infrastructure. And that is an issue that we're going to have to address because this area does not have the infrastructure to necessarily support these kinds of projects. And if we're going to have it going forward, then we've got to have a plan for addressing this infrastructure. And so, Roseanne, I think going forward, Roseanne, you know what? I call Roseanne Roxanne from the school board.
Oh, okay.
I do that
That's
all
okay.
the time. I apologize for that. She used to get on me. I endorsed her for election and said, Curtis, I'm Roseanne, not Roxanne. So I apologize for that. Okay. But we've got to get with city staff and develop a plan for addressing the infrastructure improvements in this area. And I know that the CRA can play an important role in that. But again, like I said, I will be supporting the projects this morning, but what I would like to see in the very near future is a plan, or at least how we're going to begin to move forward addressing the broader issue of infrastructure development in the Bond, or infrastructure improvements in the Bond community that will support future development.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Nick Maddox, followed by Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you. Point of clarification, so that motion was for both projects, 5.01, 5.02?
It can be. I was going to take one at a time, but it can be. I'm supportive of both, and move option one on both.
We could take them together. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Richardson, I think you make a valid point about the infrastructure piece of it, but I think these are two great projects. One thing struck me most, especially the comment I heard from Roxanne about Rhett's desire was to improve the community that he grew up in. That struck a chord with me, and you're always going to get me when you start saying stuff like that, especially when it's in communities of blight that have people of color in it. So I appreciate you going back to where you came from to rebuild that community and build it up in a way that people can be proud of. Commissioner Richardson, you made a comment about infrastructure, and I want to get back to that. One thing I was wondering is if we should ask at our next CRTPA meeting for this area to be studied, or if some kind of way we can put it as a priority on, I think it's PPL list with the CRTPA, because infrastructure is going to be a big issue in the area, especially with these types of developments coming. I'm just thinking that this may just be the beginning of what's to come for the area, and why not get ahead of the game on it and start to see how we're going to structure our infrastructure to accommodate the development that's coming. So I don't know if we would maybe have a letter from the chair to the CRTPA to ask that we look at a study for the area, or if members of this board take it back to the CRTPA, which there are some that are on the CRTPA here, to ask for a study of the area. Either way works fine with me, but I think the CRTPA needs to be involved, seeing as though a lot of what they do is transportation within the area.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to make one additional comment based on the good comments about infrastructure as well. And Commissioner Maddox, I think CRTPA probably has a role to play here, but I know the city has started work on assessing the smaller scale, I will say, infrastructure within the neighborhood, the sidewalks, the lighting. Is that right?
They actually, and they're looking at stormwater, which is a very important issue, and the CRA has played a role in that improvement before, so it would be natural for us to help with that.
So, thank you, Roxanne. I think I'm going back to the March or December blueprint meeting in discussing the Gateway project and all the road construction. I think I referenced at that time, or it may have been our comp plan as well, that our sector plan for South Side is really outdated. And that I believe we had an approved motion for city and county to work together to update that sector plan, drawing on the good information and the work that the city is doing in that area. So one thing that's on my mind a lot today, and it's I don't think any news to anyone here, that I voted against leaving the CRA because I think this is a time when more collaboration is required. I think this hasn't been an easy process, but we've made incredible progress in recent years. And I am hopeful for anyone on the city who remains after November, but in the next few months as well, that we continue to seek ways to partner. And this is a perfect example that we have blueprint funding, we have a joint planning department, we have a lot of work that overlaps and funding that overlaps. So back to Commissioner Maddox, your point, I think asking at CRTPA what role they might have in this is good, but it's my understanding they're really going to be focused on Orange Avenue, Lake Bradford, others, the larger projects. The smaller sidewalk projects may be blueprint dollars that city has or other funding sources. But I'm really eager for this to be a collaborative approach between city and county, regardless if it's CRA, CRTPA, blueprints, whatever it might be. And I hope that we have a specific way to work on that together in the future. So I think it's a good suggestion, but we've got to look at this area as a whole and not wait forever to do something. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners. There is a motion and a second on the item. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Both items, that is, acknowledgement of both items. Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion passes every 1 to 1. That's 2 for...
I'm used to it.
6 to 1.
Such is my life.
Commissioners
Need
will
to bring
now...
some infrastructure projects in here for us to vote on.
Commissioners, we're now on to, and congratulations, we're now on to item 6.01. Roxanne.
Okay, Rick McCraw will be making this presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item 6.01 is a request to approve the revised design and site plan changes for in the reduction in residential units for the 440 North project on Northminster Road that's being developed by Charles Street Partners. And it's also a request to authorize staff to approve any future funding changes that may come from the developers. This program works its way through the development process. If we recall, back in September of last year, the board approved a funding request from Charles Street Partners. It included a variety of design issues. It also included an authorization for staff to develop and negotiate a development agreement with Charles Street Partners. The agenda item also included a variety of criteria in there that would be part of the development agreement. 2 of those points were the number of residential units, a reduction of 10% or more in the residential units had to be approved by the CRA board, and a significant change in the design of the project had to be approved by the CRA board. So we're bringing back to you today is a reduction in residential units that's a result of discussions with city staff with a revised change in the marketing approach by Charles Street Partners. And so it's a reduction in the number of units, it's a new design, and it's also a request that rather than having to bring all these changes back to the board in the future, that the board authorize staff to make those changes. We would update the board of those changes in the future. We expect any change from this point to be relatively minor and related to permitting and developing requirements.
Move the item, Mr.
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the item. Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I voted against the original project, so I don't know how much credibility I have here, but I think the project looks great as far as the scale and the mix of uses. I just want to add what is probably a minority voice, but it seems like our entire city is going toward the architectural design of all hail the gray broad box, or it all looks the same. And there would be an opportunity, especially when you look at the brick that faces it on Adams Street and on Monroe, to add some architectural or textural elements that look more like Tallahassee to me. So if there's any way you could incorporate that or keep it in mind, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller.
Well, first of all, I'd like to ask the staff to put this picture up there. Could you do that?
And I also would like to point out Chuck Howell here, in case you have any questions. The developer's here to answer any questions.
I just wanted to say how much better this is than the last picture. I supported you before, but I am so much more comfortable with what you presented us today than what I saw in the first place, partly because of the comments that Commissioner Maddox just made. But I wanted everybody to be able to see the way that you've tried to provide yard to folks on different levels. And I think that the way that you've rearranged the site so that you've saved this tree that we needed for you to save, and you've actually utilized it in your design to present a much more consumer-friendly area here for people to go to. So I think that, and also expanding your market beyond just young professionals to others who might want to live in this kind of environment too. I think all those have been excellent changes, and I know that you've been working with our design staff, so I want to commend them too. But this is much, much, much better, and I think that it will be better for you also.
Mr. Mayor, if I could add, thank you for your commitment to keeping the trees. I know that you worked extra hard to do that, and that means less money a lot of times, and I greatly appreciate that. And I think it's going to be a dynamic project.
Commissioner Richardson, would you entertain adding the word minor changes? Mr. Rick indicated so in his comments that these would be minor, but the carte blanche, any changes, I'm a little uncomfortable with. I'm not sure what that means.
I'd accept that as a friendly amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioners, there is a motion and a second. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Item 6.02 has been deleted, and now we're on to item 7.01.
I'll move acceptance.
There's a motion to approve. Anything from staff on that?
No.
All right, seeing none. All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. We're now at the point for public comments on unagendaed items.
Thank you, Mayor Gillum and CRA Board. I do have 3 speaker cards on unagenda items. The first I have as a Ramona Abernathy Payne. Second is Darwin Gamble. And third, Mr. Bill Wilson. If you would, please, Miss Ramona, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Ramona Abernathy Payne. I live at 2006 East Indian Head Drive in Tallahassee, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today. Item 3 on today's agenda was an update on the North American Properties Cascades Mixed-Use Project. In concept, this seems like a good project, and congratulations on the hotel signing. However, I want to make you aware that there's a great deal of community dissatisfaction with the way the project is going forward. Many in the community felt blindsided by the demolition stage, especially the trees and the Firestone building. A number of misleading statements have been cited in the PUD application, especially regarding the solicitation of public input. A number of people interested in the project who were watching for notices of meetings and ways to give input have been surprised by some of the elements. One pleasant surprise was the inclusion of underground utilities. Good choice, thank you. However, we have concerns about Section 5, which calls for replanting trees native to North America. That should read native to North Florida. We object to much of the signage described in Chapter 7, not the least of which is the sign bridge over Gadsden Street. This huge arch would create an entrance that looks more like a beachside amusement park than a public roadway. The chapter on consistency calls for creating a streetscape consistent with other areas of development on Gaines Street. That should specify development on East Gaines Street, which has always had a different aesthetic than West Gaines, and what is being built in College Town. And please, not another black box. This project should be consistent with the modern architecture of the Bloxham WPA building that has survived the wrecking ball. Related to that streetscape, the PUD application cites a maximum building height of 130 feet measured from the lowest point on the property. This building height should be adjusted so that there are no more than 4 stories on the Gaines Street side, and anything higher will block the view of Cascades Park from the city and the view of the city from Cascades Park. This is a view that the project purports to enhance. Please make sure the project remains true to the character and charm of Tallahassee. We're not Nashville, we're not Boulder, we're not South Florida. We have a unique aesthetic that should be respected and maintained. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Mr. Darwin Gamble.
And good morning, Darwin Gamble, 1248 Halifax Court. I'm still not convinced that a commercial development is even appropriate for that piece of real estate. I'm thinking it would be more feasible to put in a museum. Really, a museum of history. We could call it the Tallahassee History Center. That comes from Delatry Hollinger. That's his idea to name it that. We could complete it before Tallahassee's bicentennial in 2024. Our citizens and visitors could learn about our community's history, including some of the things Dr. Hollifield talked about earlier. And I just think that would be a much better use. They could even see photographs of all the buildings we've destroyed, the historic buildings. So please think about it. The Tallahassee History Center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, Bill Wilson, 1816 Old Fort Drive. President of Graceful Solutions, and here today is a representative of that group, as well as the Greater Bond Neighborhood Association and the Frenchtown Neighborhood Improvement Association. And all I'm here to do is ask for some time on your agenda at your next meeting to present a proposal that we've been trying to bring forward since last September and haven't had the opportunity to have agenda time with you, and would like to do that. So that's my request. We're trying to propose a unique approach to neighborhood improvement, and with focus on a particular block in Bond and in Frenchtown. And we have 3 local nonprofits trying to come together to do that. And we'd like to share our thoughts with you and see what you think about it.
Thank you. I don't know the particulars, but assuming this has germaneness to the role of the CRA, I certainly wouldn't object to a presentation. Commissioner Miller.
Commissioners, we at the, our steering committee for Frenchtown have had the opportunity to hear Mr. Wilson make a presentation, and honestly, I didn't see anything that was any different than any other consultant or contractor coming forward in response to an RFP. Mr. Wilson's concepts are definitely going to be included in what we bring forward to you, and I'd like for you to consider those in the context of the larger body of work. My real problem was that basically I feel like we should allow everybody who has an idea about doing something in Frenchtown come forward and be on our agenda if that's the way we're going to proceed. But I don't really think that's the way we do business, and so I would object.
Again, this is my first time hearing of all of it. There is a committee. I assume this ties into a committee that's already working. What is the...
Commissioner Miller's committee, yes, it does tie into that. The proposal is the block-by-block proposal, which I think most of you have heard about. And there are some issues. We didn't feel that it was ready to bring forward. We have a planning staff that is working on or can work on similar issues, and we're trying to get all that sorted out. We usually don't just bring you proposals unless we've had an opportunity to really vet them and feel that it's something that the CRA can and should do.
Got it. Again, if it's germane to the work, Commissioner Richardson, followed by Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly would be interested in hearing the proposal, but I do want it, Bill, to be a part of, and I understand your frustration, but I do want it to be a part of a larger plan that the committee is working on, because if we start piecemealing this thing, it gets out of control. But my point being that I do want to hear the proposal come forward, and if Bill has been frustrated, then let's work with him and make sure that that is brought before the board at some point.
We tried.
On point.
I have a quick on point, but I can wait.
Go for it.
Oh, thank you. Just to understand real clearly, Mr. Wilson, what's the rush? It seems like it's working through a process. And
Commissioner, yeah, I wouldn't call it a rush. We met with the CRA Advisory Committee in September of last year. Or October of last year. They unanimously endorsed this proposal.
Let me rephrase the question. If it's in the committee that Commissioner Miller is a part of, I think Commissioner Richardson has indicated he'd like to be part of a larger movement. It sounds like to me you're trying to operate outside of that movement a little bit. So I'm trying to figure out why not stay within it. Not saying that you should. I'm just trying to understand your reason for wanting to move forward outside of everything else that's going on with Commissioner Miller's committee.
Actually, this effort was presented before that effort started. So I don't think we're trying to get outside of it. We're trying to work with it, and we think having an integrated plan with what the placemaking group is doing. So there's detailed plans ready to go forward to actually move on one block in Frenchtown to make a visible difference that fits in with that overall plan, makes sense, and at the same time doing something similar in Bond. And I think, our concern is that we've been now bumped off 4 different agendas for different reasons, and it's, if we were a big developer with a lot of money, we'd be here, but we're 3 local nonprofits trying to do something different, and we can't seem to get hurt. So,
thank you, Commissioner Dozier.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, I appreciate your hard work. You were chairing our housing committee for a long time. We've made a lot of effort or progress on that. I hear your frustration. It's not my impression, having talked to Roxanne and others about this, that you were necessarily bumped from different agendas. I wouldn't mind, Roxanne, you chime in a minute on this, just to make sure I'm right on this. But we have really tried hard as this board to get to a process, a procedural approach. What we just did with Frenchtown Partners, not approving money in advance of an agenda item and putting a time frame on that. Mr. Turnquist, I looked over there, but he's already left. I know that he wanted to be on the agenda before today, but needed to do some more work with staff. So, and certainly large developers also, it takes a long time to work through this process. So I just wanted to give staff the credit for trying to get their arms around a lot of different types of projects and put things in a process that is fair and looks similar. So that was one comment. But the second one is it was my understanding that, and I'm not sure if you want to comment on this or Roxanne, that this proposal wasn't necessarily like a facade improvement grant or a particular funding of a infrastructure or a commercial building, some kind of or affordable housing project, that it was closer to what the city is already doing in an assessment and and let me say, I've not read through it. I mean, I've received emails from you and others, but this looked very different. So I appreciate your hard work, but I do support staff, Commissioner Miller, what you just said, in working through the process and making sure all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. I think we got to get out of the habit of just adding things to the agenda that aren't ready for it in this process, and that is a fairness issue for all projects. So again, I really appreciate your efforts. I look forward to seeing this in the future, even if we're not sitting on the board. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Are there any other, did you want to address the
yeah,
agenda?
I think it's important.
Are there other speakers?
The city is working on a very comprehensive program of improvements, and they understand that they have to do things in a stepwise manner. You address certain issues first, and then you build on that. What we've been trying to do is when we have an appropriate proposal that might be part of that or relate to that, then we send them to the appropriate staff in the city and hope they will coordinate with them, because you can't just piecemeal urban development and do it well. We also, again, don't want to put things on the agenda that are not ripe, or perhaps there are conflicts inherent to the proposal that would preclude us from funding it in the first place. And we try to work through that. I appreciate Bill's frustration, but we do have regulations and rules that we do need to follow. And I stressed that earlier this morning. So as part of that overall project, it may be more appropriate to let the planning staff that we already have and that can already do this kind of work. They're certainly prepared and able to do it. They don't have conflicts such as property ownership in that area. So there are a lot of issues here that you may not be familiar with, but staff is, and we have to deal with it. Now, it might be timely, and I can talk to Wayne about this, it might be very timely to come to the CRA board and give you a presentation, and to the county board, an overall presentation of everything the city's doing and how the CRA fits into that, because it is a great structure. It's incredibly effective, but it's very new. And we're very excited about it. But I think it might be, if the county hasn't had an opportunity to see that, probably a great idea.
Great. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. Are there, Commissioner Miller?
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to add is the amount of time that our collective planning staff have spent on this Frenchtown and 50 concept and projects. I mean, literally no stone has gone unturned. Devin Levins has reviewed, and he's even actually pulled in other staff people to help him. Wayne's given tremendous support to the project. We've been meeting every single month. One of my criteria in beginning this was that we wanted to know what the residents of Frenchtown want to see in the future, in their future. And that you will hear more about the block by block. I think it's gone incredibly quickly considering all of the things that had to be done, and honestly, I don't really believe that we've been working on this since last fall. It all started right away after we agreed to sell the Standard property. And I think that, I mean, we've had charrettes in the area. Devin has reviewed every conceivable, and believe me, there are volumes of them, reports from in the past that have been done on the Frenchtown area. All suggestions have been looked at. And honestly, the group is finally, it's taken a long time to get their confidence that this time the outcome would be any different. So in this particular case, they had no input. The residents didn't have any input on the selection of the block and a number of other things. And so I'd like for this to be considered in the context with that. You will see that. You're welcome to have a briefing at any time, all of you. And because it is our planning staff that's doing this work. So anytime that you need a briefing on the Frenchtown and 50 placemaking effort, be aware, though, that this is Frenchtown residents sitting down together, making these suggestions and recommendations to you. And I will say, too, that Mr. Wilson was on the agenda at the last meeting. He had 15 minutes on the agenda and actually was able to use 30 minutes of that time. So it's not as though there's been a complete shutout of the idea at all. It's just that with all the work that so many people are doing on this to get a real result and a real concept for the people that they have developed, this is only one small piece of it, one small option, and you need to get the entire package all together so that you can decide what you think is best.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Miller. I was just going to say, Roxanne, I really appreciate you mentioning an update to the County Commission as well. I think it would be in our interest, I won't belabor the point, I've mentioned it before, to continue as much collaboration as possible. And we do get emails, whether it's Cascades Park or Frenchtown or others, from residents. So at any time when the County Commission could get an update on this, even if it's just informational or it relates to overlapping issues with Blueprint or others, that would be exceptional. So thank you, Roxanne, for the offer, and I think that would be welcomed by the County Commission. I'll look to our chairman. But,
Great. Thank you all very much. And I believe there are no more public speakers.
That's correct.
So finally, I'm not sure if this meeting is televised or not, but there is a tropical system expected in the Gulf, and I think the city has announced, and I'm not sure about the county, but sandbagging locations, both city and county. Check our websites for information on that. I don't believe a heavy wind is expected, but I do believe that heavy rain is expected. So if you're in flood-prone areas, please make sure you get your sandbags. With that, thank you, everybody. And yes, Commissioner Richardson.
Yeah, I've got several items very quickly. Roxanne, can you tell me where we are with the? I had to catch myself.
Yeah, you almost did it again.
The proceeds from the sale of the Bloxham and Johns building. When will that be available to us for use?
That will be available at closing, which will probably be in about a month and a half.
Okay.
We're working through all the agreements.
Okay. You don't have to answer now, but at our next meeting, I was just curious as to how an item got to the agenda of the CRA board when nobody requested that agenda item. It was deleted. It took care of itself, but as you know, I had a question as to how that made it to the agenda when I don't know who requested that it be put on the agenda and who made the call to put it there. So that's an issue that we may have to address.
Do you have a response real quick on that? I assume you're talking about the art.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I can't speak for everybody, but I think that because it went through the county on a Tuesday night, there was the assumption that we needed to have something on the agenda in case the board needed to address it or not. And it was as simple as that.
So the staff took their cues from a county vote on the item that.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, on May 8th and 9th, I thought city and county took votes to add it to our commission agendas respectively on the 22nd and 23rd. And if it was on both city and county commission agendas, then it would by default be on CRA because all three bodies had to vote on it.
We did not at the city take the item up. We requested that something be brought back to the commission.
And I pulled it and we voted to keep the IA the same. So both city and county were consistent once that issue was dispensed with. But I thought the CRA, once the city and county requested the item be on our agenda after the 8th and the 9th, it was kind of automatic that it would be on the CRA agenda because it would require a vote here. Is that correct?
It's not automatic, but because both commissions had made the action, we felt that we needed to be ready. It was
I don't think I mean, we're past it's water under the bridge, but it is an important question to know how things do end up at the. And I think that's a process question that has to be figured out. The city commission did not request that this be brought to this meeting. No. We requested additional information be brought back to the city commission.
Correct.
Those were not identical actions between the city and the county.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been great being here. I've been here on this board since.
You made it? You made it?
I made it. I made it. I've been here on this board since I was elected.
One other issue. I wasn't done.
Oh, I was going to speak on to you.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
But I do think Commissioner Richardson brings up a valid point. We worked hard, and Commissioner Dozier said it over and over again on process and policy. And though I think staff probably acted based off of what they thought might happen, I do think you bring up a valid point in that if it hadn't been asked for by one of the commissioners or board members sitting here, it probably wasn't right to be on the agenda, even if it was an assumption that nothing could happen if it wasn't on the agenda. So I'll leave it in the able hands of our city commissioners to work out process and policy on how things get to this board. But I do think you had a very valid question.
Thank you.
The developments that we saw today are amazing, and just an indication of what's happening within our community. Everybody here has seen the cranes all over town. I wanted to make one more comment.
You mean the city bird?
Yeah, the city bird, right. The last comment I'll make, Commissioner Richardson, and it's a little bit outside of the policy thing we're speaking of, but I work out now at the New U on the south side, and was sad to hear that the building that my gym was going to be torn down, but was eager and excited to hear that a new development is going in its place that we at the CRA, the city, Northern County has nothing to do with. And that's great to see that kind of growth going on south of the bridge, and we don't have to contribute anything. So that's pretty cool. I want to bring it up. That's pretty cool that's going to happen. And hopefully I'll still be able to work out there and the new you be there when it's rebuilt. So thank you, Commissioner Richardson, for allowing me to make those comments.
I had one last,
go ahead.
one last issue, Mr. Mayor, is several of the neighbors have called concerning the fence around A Life Recovery Center, which is the drug rehabilitation center that is, in all full disclosure, an outreach program of the Bethel AME Church, which the mayor and I are members. There is no benefit that inures to either of us.
Our salvation. It's kind of tied up in that.
But they have had some concerns about the fence around that facility and it not matching the aesthetics of the neighborhood. And so they're hoping that something can be done to change that fence. And so what we are requesting is that the CRA staff work with Bethel AME to see how we might be able to address that issue in the area.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner
I
Miller.
want to add my voice to Commissioner Richardson's on that topic. I'm glad, thank you for bringing that up. We apparently have fence out there stored somewhere that would do just fine, and we could actually make this change very easily. So I hope you can move on that and have it action. By next month, you bring us something and we'll say yay, 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 and it'll improve the area. So very
we
easily.
can't do that. I'm sorry. No, I'm kidding. We can actually do that very quickly. Previously, the board had decided to have, direction from at least 2 board members to do something like this. Since we're getting that direction, we can do that. There is some fence that we have available, and we can add to it. It would be within the scope of what we would be able to spend administratively. So that's not an issue. Thank you for the direction.
And my question is that, and I'm not positive that this isn't the same question that Commissioner Richardson asked first, but I want to, if you could give us an update on exactly when he asked for the money that came from the $500,000 is what I thought you were asking about, that the city owes to the CRA for the John site. And that somehow caught up in the mix and needs to be contributed over to the Cascades project
I was asking about the $4
effort.
million.
Okay, and then you're right. And then there's the transfer from one CRA to the other of this large amount of cash. And what I think maybe it would be fun to have a conversation about, just an update. So I guess that's exactly what you were asking for, yeah. So if you could possibly give us an update on all these financial transactions. Do you think, let's see, it's May, June, July. Our next meeting will be in July, correct?
Correct. July 9th. It's actually early in the month.
Right, good. But do you think you can have that, do you think you'll close by then?
No, we won't close by then.
Know that. But if you could give us an idea before we go on break of exactly how all of that will play out, so we'll have a good understanding of it.
I could give you a 2-second update. Basically, that $500,000, you may recall, think back to the fall when we were funding the event space at the new project in Cascades Park. Right. That $500,000 was part of that. So that's been dedicated to that. We singled it out specifically in the agenda. The $4 million that will come out of the sale of that land, that automatically goes back to the Frenchtown South Side.
Okay.
And what we will do, we will have the money, right, and the interest and everything. What we will do is we'll have a discussion with the CRA board and talk about priorities, how that money can be invested, what are some of the opportunities. We'll work with the city and decide, is it infrastructure, how do we want to spend that money? But we will basically set it aside until we have that direction from the CRA board. That money also is not time limited, so it's really important. It doesn't have a 3-year life.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Dozier.
Mr. Mayor, I know everyone's ready to go. I just had meant to thank Ramona and Darwin for being here today and making comments about North American. This feels like a perennial problem that there are, from my perspective, a lot of times of public engagement leading up. We heard from Deletria and others on the museum ideas and things like that. I know the community, a lot of folks, and I think a lot of board members have heartburn about seeing our Patriarch Oaks go, or seeing a historic building. And just in the last meeting here with the CRA, I think we did do a lot of conversations on whether or not we could save Firestone, whether or not we could do different things. The position that property was in, and as you just heard, the money that has to go back into Frenchtown Southside CRA, and this switch, from my perspective, made it complicated, where without a tremendous amount of public investment, we couldn't save those properties. We had to sell them. So we can talk more about that, but I just know there's been a lot of dialogue, there's been reporting on this, and there's some concerns about that. We're in a good conversation, hard but good, on urban infill right now. And I think this project has engaged everyone in a way. So I didn't want to leave your comments hanging. They're fair, and I think all of us are, and the developers and the community, the neighborhoods are all thinking about this in the future, regardless of this one project moving forward. So thank you for being here. I appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Commissioners. If there are no further comments, we stand at adjournment. Thank you. We'll miss you.